I'm Molly Steinwald. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Learning Center, and I'm very, very, very happy that you're here today. And how many of you have come to learn about microplastics because you don't know much about it? Yeah? All right. How many of you have been to the ELC before? Awesome. How many of you are members? Hey, we're doing pretty well. All right. So, I am very happy you're here. We are continuing to do more and more programs like this, and we really value your input, not only in how we're doing currently, but of interest in programs that you would like to see us do in the future, maybe offering programs at different times, you name it. We are throwing everything out there to try to be able to utilize our campus as much as possible for the benefit of the community. So I'll just tell you 2 minutes about the ELC. So we are 30 years old this year. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are 64 acres, and we offer a significant amount of programs, not only to formal education programs like schools, but a significant amount of family festivals, boat tours, nature walks, significant outreach to the community with places like Head Start, Senior Resource Association, Literacy Alliance, or Learning Alliance, you name it. So I have a bunch of literature up there. I would strongly recommend / beg that you take it with you so you learn all of the stuff that's going on here. We're very happy with our evolution, and we're thrilled to see you here, and I'm extremely happy that Emily is here as well. ELC's mission is to educate, inspire, and empower all people to be active stewards of the environment and their own well-being, and we're really moving towards the idea of not just teaching about environmental issues and how they affect your health, but also how important nature and contact with nature is incredibly beneficial for your physical and psychological well-being, and also what you can do in your daily life in order to be positive towards the rest of the living and even non-living world. So with that, I will introduce Emily. I would say that I'm absolutely thrilled that she is here. One of the initiatives that ELC has taken part of. Okay, so we need money for broken doors. We need to put another sign on there. Is really starting to build more partnerships with other organizations and be involved in initiatives that are often not necessarily thought of, and then people really have no idea what's going on in many ways. So we're excited to be involved with your organization. ELC is actually now a field site, a data collection site for the Microplastics network that Emily is a part of. So I have to find out apparently where the water samples are that she's supposed to pick up today. So I'm skipping away with that. So without further ado, Emily, would you like to introduce yourself and tell a little about your background first?
Sure.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming on a Saturday morning. My name is Emily Dark, and I'm originally from New England, but I like warm weather. So my studies brought me down to Florida in 2013. I actually was an intern at the Smithsonian Station in Fort Pierce. Do you all know where that is, or heard of that? The Smithsonian has a marine biology research station in Fort Pierce. So I came down on an internship for grad school, focused on mangroves. So, and then it just kind of tumbled from there in terms of meeting these people here, people there, and then a project kind of popped up, and I ended up coming back to do my thesis on the invasive lionfish. Who's heard of invasive lionfish? So I ended up focusing on lionfish in the Indian River Lagoon. So, and then I just networked and found this job and stayed. So I've been here in this job for just 4 years now. So I work for the Department of Environmental Protection, FDEP, and who here has been to a Florida State Park? So DEP runs the state park system. They also have the air and water regulation. But then they have the coastal office. Has anyone here heard of the Florida Coastal Office? Mm-hmm. No, not many people have. I'll stand over here to do the slides. So I work in the mission, conserving and restoring Florida's coastal and aquatic resources for the benefit of the people and the environment. So along with the state parks, it's about public lands and people getting out and enjoying the environment, just like here at the ELC. But we also manage a lot of these lands. So how do we manage them, and then allow people to enjoy them sustainably as well? So The Aquatic Preserve System out of the Coastal Office manages 41 aquatic preserves around the state. And here's a map of all the aquatic preserves. Also, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, that's co-managed with us and NOAA. So, a lot of really cool places. You guys have heard of Apalachicola Bay, right? Mercury Bay. Those are all aquatic preserves. So, our office is in Fort Pierce, and there's 5 of us, and we manage all the aquatic preserves, the 7 of them that make up the entire lagoon. So, Mosquito Lagoon, all of Banana, Malabar to Beer over here at Fort Pierce, Jensen to Jupiter, all the way down to Waxahachie, Lake Worth Creek. So that's almost 100,000 acres that we manage. Yeah, and then we also manage the spoil islands. So we do a lot of different stuff. So the Indian River Lagoon Aquatic Preserves, I just have some pictures of some main things that we do. We also have riverine systems. This is the St. Sebastian River right here. One of our other aquatic preserves is the North Fork of the St. Lucie River. We do a lot of natural resource monitoring and research, like oyster reefs, the natural reefs that we do have, what they look like, how they're doing. It's a picture of Wildcat Cove in Fort Pierce here. We do a lot of bird monitoring and habitat restoration for listed and threatened species like the least tern here. Who here has heard of oyster catchers? I love oyster catchers. They're the cutest. I'm not a bird person, I'm learning, and I just adore oyster catchers. So actually this past week we were out on some conservation islands, not recreation islands, kind of pushing back the brush to make the beaches, the rocky beaches, nice for the oyster catchers. And then picture the spoil islands up there. So just a few examples of things that we do. So today we'll talk about microplastics, obviously, plastics in general, what microplastics are, what's being done, what the issue is, why they're a problem, and then I'll talk about the projects here locally that we're doing and how people can get involved. And any discussions, any questions, feel free to ask. Keep it as casual as possible. And then I'll talk about what I've brought. I'm very proud of my big poster there. That is, it's a poster made by NOAA, National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, and it was just such a great graphic. So after the talk, feel free to go up and look at the poster and grab some things. So I saw a lot of you have not really learned about or don't know what microplastics are. So obviously they're small pieces of plastic, right? They are plastics that are smaller than 1/5 of an inch. And we have different types of microplastics. We have plastics that are made to be small, just when they're produced. So those are primary microplastics. Things like microbeads, you'll have heard of those that were in the face washes and things like that. Sometimes pillows or stuffed animals, things stuffing, sometimes you have the little plastic beads, things like that. So they're made to be small already. Nurdles, resin pellets, things like that, toy fillers, like I said. And then we have secondary microplastics. Those are a result of larger pieces of plastic breaking down. We all know that so many things we use are made out of plastic. It's all around us. So when those are in the environment and exposed to the elements, and they break down. So those become secondary microplastics. And here are some just nice pictures that I've taken from the website there. You can see the little microbeads there. Some of them are super teeny. The ones in personal care products, toothpaste and things like that. There's plastic in a lot of those. Yeah, and I know that there was some laws passed in terms of not producing more. And a lot of companies are using more natural options like walnut shells and jojoba and things like that, natural beads for exfoliation instead of the plastic. So, but those are really teeny. And here's just some pictures. On the top, we have primary microplastics. There's an example of a Beanie Baby, some toothpaste stuff. And then down below, what secondary microplastics might look like under a microscope. A film here, I know it's a little light to see. You know, chunks of maybe a bag or something, little fragments. We have fragments, fibers, different types of secondary microplastics that we look for. So, just stepping back a little bit, talking about plastics in general, does anyone know, like, when we started using plastics or what they are made out of originally? Yeah, petroleum products, right? Natural gas, oil, coal, things like that. Doing a little research, you know, when rubber started being used in the 1800s, that is plastic. And the original plastics came from cellulose, parts of plants and trees, and they added chemicals and heated it, and kind of realized that we're, get a durable product. So we've made plastics, and they've become so popular and widely used because they're so adaptable and heat resistant and can be used for so many things, and ended up replacing things like leather, wood, glass. And if you walk into a store or your home or anywhere, you look around and you're like, wow, yes. I mean, plastic is just used for everything. And they're polymers, complex hydrogen, carbon bonds with other things mixed in, sulfur and other chemicals. So that's why a lot of them are polyethylene, polystyrene. They got the poly word because they're polymers. So in terms of plastics in our environment, in the 1970s, I guess that was kind of when the reports kind of started in terms of, wow, we have a lot of plastics in our ocean, and that was getting on the radar. And then in terms of research, it kind of started increasing in the 90s and early 2000s because of the fact that people were seeing the wildlife, the typical pictures with the six-pack rings around the necks, the fishing line, the nets, things like that. That was getting outcry, was getting attention, public attention, and things, started kind of turning towards a bit more research on the plastics in the environment. And then we've all heard of the Pacific garbage patch. Now there's the Caribbean garbage patch. So it's like, wow, we've got a lot of plastic making its way to our oceans, and not just our oceans, right? We've lakes, rivers, things like that. So our waterways. And just reading different bits of research, the latest one was estimated around 8 million tons of plastic a year make it to our oceans. So a lot of plastic making it to our waterways. In this study in 2015, they found 275 million metric tons of plastic were generated in 192 countries in 2010. So 5 grocery bags of plastic for every foot of shoreline in these countries studied. So we have a lot of coastal development, we know that, right? So a lot of plastic in the coastal areas. And then just 32 million metric tons of plastic generated in general in the US in 2012. So we're using a lot, we're demanding a lot of plastic is being made. Has anyone here seen the new movie Albatross? I saw that at IRSC. That was really moving. We were at that was, we have these remote islands and these birds, and they're going out to the ocean and gathering food for a long time, right, and bringing it back for their chicks, and they're scooping up plastics in the ocean, and they're dying. And this is a famous photo of the albatross with the stomach full of plastics. So it's reaching all corners of our world. And that's a picture of a floating garbage patch there. So, and it kind of mixes in the floating natural fibers like the sargassum and things like that. So it kind of gets intertwined in there. So why do we care? Like, what does it matter? So why is it an issue? So obviously, like we spoke about plastics, we're producing a lot, we're making a lot, and we're wasting a lot. It's getting out as trash. It's not seeming to decrease, and it's making it to our natural areas. These petroleum products, they break down, but they don't ever disappear. They just turn into microplastics. They're not going away. They're just breaking down. They do absorb toxins while they're in the environment, and a lot of them are made with toxins already. They are eaten by marine life, and there are potential human impacts. This is a relatively new field of research, the microplastics, and it's just exploding, and I'll show you on another page all the different research that's happening. But now it's kind of like, okay, well, it's in the environment, it's in the animals, we're finding it everywhere, so how's that going to impact us? Clearly, if it's in the fish, we're eating plastic, so that dynamic is of interest and is being researched. But in that sense, the additives and the toxins are of interest. Are they leaching into the environment? Are they leaching into the wildlife? And they could be, impacting us. So those are some reasons why, this is a pretty interesting topic. So in terms of microplastics in the environment, how do they get there? And then, questions like, do they accumulate in the food chain because they're finding them in small organisms, plankton? So if animals are eating those, and then once the animals are being eaten, how are they accumulating through the food chain? Once again, what are the human risks? And we have a lot of interest in organisms here in the Indian River Lagoon, like, say, oysters. And there's been studies done on their impacts on oysters because they're filter feeders. So how do they get there? There's many ways, and if you think about it, okay, how does trash get to the lagoon? Sometimes it falls off trucks, right? Sometimes you have rain, you have wind, and a lot of this is actually that really cool poster. I mean, it makes its way to the water. But in terms of microplastics, a lot of them make their way to the wastewater treatment plants, and they're too small to be caught, so they make their way out as effluent. So they're finding that that's a major way that microplastics are making it to the ocean, to the waters. And believe it or not, a lot of research has shown that a lot of these microplastics are fibers from our clothing. And some studies have shown that thousands of fibers come out of one article of clothing in one wash. So a lot of our clothing is made from plastic. Fleece jackets, I was looking at my stuff, my clothing, like, oh man, this, it's everywhere. So if you can't see it, you don't know. So it's going to our water treatment plants, it's in our water, and it's making its way out. So there's just a nice layout there of the process. Runoff from landfill, urban areas, industrial areas as well. So many different ways it's kind of making it to our water. Here I wanted to have a research page just to show you all the different types of research projects that are looking at this now, but it also shows you how widespread it is. So around the world, people are researching microplastics, not only in wildlife, in different environments, but they're looking in really remote areas. I highlighted these because they were just kind of unique. Microplastics in deep sea sediments. They're finding them in deep sea sediments. And then Great Lakes. And then here, a large remote mountain lake, they're finding them. So really odd places. They're everywhere. So it's kind of interesting. I saved some websites just that were really interesting. I'm not sure how to get out of this, let me see. But I definitely wanted to share. So I did a search on research on Science Direct here on microplastics, and I got 3,883 results. So I just thought that was interesting. And then, if you go on to, isn't that a crazy picture? So this is National Geographic, and I found that they have a really cool Planet or Plastic. So if you go home and Google that, Planet or Plastic, National Geographic, a lot of interesting stories, research that's happening. They're interviewing people, scientists around the world that are looking at microplastics. And they had a lot of cool articles. And look at these pictures here. It's a little slow. But areas in Africa, it was really, really interesting. Also, microplastics in Antarctic. They're finding microplastics in the ice in really remote areas in Antarctica. I thought this was an interesting. University of Hull, they're doing research in the Antarctic on microplastics and how that impacts not only the ecosystem but the different wildlife there. So a lot out there. So come on. So who here has heard of when we have whales, marine mammals washing on shore, people will do a necropsy, right, to see how long the animal lived, what it ate, maybe what toxins it had. So now on that radar is what plastics are in the whale or the dolphin, because they're finding plastics. And I keep seeing it pop up around the world. They're finding microplastics and macroplastics in a lot of these marine mammals that are migrating around the world in our oceans. So it's really, really troublesome. So I thought this was interesting. The Global Microplastics Initiative, this is their front page of their website, showing the amounts of microplastics and the studies that are on their radar, on their website. So people are doing microplastics research all around the world. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. That's another great resource and website. So the Florida Microplastics Awareness Project is a great resource, and that is how I learned about microplastics here in Florida. And it's through University of Florida, IFAS Extension. It's a Sea Grant program funded by NOAA, their marine debris program. And so it's a great collaboration. And Maya McGuire out of University of Florida is in charge of it. She's up in Gainesville. So that is kind of the hub of information for Florida. for microplastics. And it's really great. All the resources, pictures, manuals, videos, how to get involved. And that's kind of the where we send all our data. We use our data for what we want for our projects, but also we share it with them. So there's a map on there, and you can click into the dots around Florida and see who's collected the samples and what we found. So it's a really cool website. So that's kind of the framework that we're using to look at microplastics here in the Indian River Lagoon in this area, Treasure Coast. And they actually got their methods for everything they do from that last slide, the global initiative. They developed just standard procedures in terms of collecting the water and analyzing that, which I'll tell you about. So that program is really great. And I'm actually technically the Treasure Coast coordinator on the Florida Microplastics Awareness Project website. I like to serve as just kind of a resource to help people. A lot of teachers reach out to me and they say, I really want to have my students sample. It's really easy, actually. And it's just a matter of getting the equipment. And that is all on the Florida Microplastics Awareness Project website, what you need, where to get it, and then get the samples and stuff. And so whether you're an elementary school student or a grad student, you can research microplastics and make your own research questions, and it's really accessible. So in terms of what is being done here and the collaboration between us and the ELC and some other groups, which is really cool, the Indian River Lagoon National Estuaries Program, the IRL-NEP, they have funded, we wrote a proposal and they funded a project that is headed up by University of Central Florida, UCF, and it's a huge collaboration. They funded a project for a year that we're going to be doing, looking at microplastics in the water of the Indian River Lagoon from way up north, Mosquito Lagoon, all the way down to Stewart area, and also in 12 natural and restored oyster reefs throughout the entire lagoon. And there's a master's student at UCF that is that's her project. She's heading it up, but yet we're all working together. So we've got IRL and UP in the top here because they're funding it. And then UCF, Dr. Linda Walters, and us, DEP, and FOS down in Stewart. You guys have heard of FOS, Florida Oceanographic Society. The three of us kind of put the proposal together, heading up the project. And we've got the Oxbow Eco Center in Port St. Lucie, the ELC. I didn't have the ELC on that, so silly, because it was the main organization here. NBC, Smithsonian, UF, so it's a huge collaboration project. We have 30 sites throughout the lagoon for water samples that we're sampling once a month. So it takes a lot of collaboration and a lot of volunteers and coordination. It's really fun. So like I said, those are 30 sites all the way up there, from the Mosquito Canaveral area, all the way down to the St. Lucie River. And here's a picture of Wildcat Cove. So the 12 reefs that we have, we're sampling them 3 times throughout the year, and we're collecting 30 oysters at those sample times. And we're collecting adults and juveniles. And we're looking into this because up in Mosquito Lagoon area, UCF actually conducted a study looking at their oysters, a student did, and she just sampled the little ones, the little oysters. And I think she sampled approximately around 60 oysters and found over 800 microplastics in those 60 oysters. So that inspired them to, why don't we look at more oysters throughout our lagoon? We like to think, we like to monitor our oysters and our ecosystems in general, how are they doing so you can track them over time. So we're kind of learning the new ways to evaluate or think of health of our ecosystem. So this is a new thing to kind of incorporate into the health, right? So how do we monitor these systems? Well, microplastics might be part of that monitoring now. So how is that going to impact our ecosystem? So that should be part of it. So this is just expanding. So since they found so many up there, are we going to find that in our reefs in Brevard County, Indian River County, St. Lucie County? So I think it's pretty exciting. We did our first oyster sampling in November, and then we've been sampling every month since October for the water. And that'll go till next fall. And UF IFAS lab in Fort Pierce, Dr. Alan Wright has a soil and water conservation lab, and he so nicely lets us filter the water. So we go out to the water with just a 16-ounce Nalgene bottle, yes, made out of plastic, and we take some other data too. Wind speed, is it calm water, is it ripply, is it wavy, is it windy, the temperature of the water, its salinity, the depth, and then we take the sample from the surface of the water, and we take 5 bottles for each site every month. So for my 10 sites that I'm in charge of, we've got 5 sites up here. The volunteers at the ELC do 5 sites, and my volunteers at the Oxbow do 5 sites. That's 50 bottles a month that we filter. So Dr. Wright at UF thankfully has 20 filtration setups. So we can do 20 at a time, which is amazing. And that takes about 7 hours to do all those 50 bottles. So I'm very happy that Dr. Wright lets me use his lab to do those because I had 2 filtering setups. But we'll probably still have a setup, maybe I'm trying to get a setup here and one of the Oxbow so people can still be involved. And if we just do a couple here and at the Oxbow so people can do that process. So basically we have filters that we put in the top there. Then you have a vacuum pump system that pulls it down. And you just take your time pouring the sample here in there and just watch it as it goes down and keep pouring it until it's gone. And then you take that little filter when it's done and put it in your petri dish, close it up. And then eventually you'll pop it under a microscope and identify what you see. Of course, that can be kind of difficult. There's manuals on that website to show you what is natural, what is not. You want to wear cotton when you're doing it so the fibers may not fall onto you. All these things we're learning, you know. They're like, oh, I found all these microplastics, there are fibers and they're blue. Well, wait, uh-oh, they may have come from my shirt, you know. So I'm learning all these things. Or if you're sitting under an AC vent or something, you want to be in a kind of quiet area with not a lot of people walking by. So all these protocols we're learning as we go, or at least, you know, and all those things are put on the Florida Microplastics page. So any new protocols or things people have learned, we go there, okay, what do we do? How do we do it correctly, you know? So it's fun, you know, and the volunteers love it. And we rinse everything 3 times. Every time you're using new things. Get the plastics off the plastic petri dishes. You know, it's tough because everything you're using is plastic. But it is really exciting and interesting to pop that, you know, filter under the microscope and see what you have. And it was really hard to find 100% cotton t-shirts to wear. Seriously, I was looking through all my clothing. It's like polyester, you know, synthetic materials. So yeah, I went through my clothing, finally found a cotton t-shirt to wear for filtering. So how can you get involved? You know, there's different ways to get involved. You can actually volunteer for the project if you want. We have some volunteers that collect the water samples, but in terms of having backup people who might be able to jump in and sample if someone can't make it, there's always opportunities. Here at the ELC, or if you live, you know, further south, the Oxbow, there are people up north too, throughout Florida, that have volunteer programs. The MDC in Smyrna. So you can get involved with actual projects. There are resources online on how to cut down your plastic use. There's a lot of efforts around to help cut down on single-use plastics. You know, a lot of the stuff, like I said, it's all making to our water. So how do we cut down? You can make a difference. You know, some people think, well, if I don't, I mean, who cares? You know, well, it does help because things do catch on. You know, and maybe I do the best I can to remember. I make sure my reusable plastic, garbage bags, grocery bags, make it to the back of my car so I can actually use those. You know, having my own straw, reusable straw. I do the best I can. I'm using my Nalgene and not getting water bottles, you know, plastic water bottles. And when we're out in the lagoon, because I'm on the water a lot, we're always picking up trash. You know, and we're on the spoil islands, we're on the water, always picking up plastics. Who here knows how long it takes for fishing line to start breaking down? Any guesses? To start, like, breaking down.
500 years.
Basically. 500, 600 years. How about a plastic bag? If it was just, say you just tossed it out on the trail, and it was just sitting outside, average 10 to 20 years for these to start to break down. Mind you, not go away, but break down into small pieces, right? So I've got the fishing line, and I just have examples of things that's everyday use, toys, pens, you know, things that we just don't think about. And also, packaging is a huge thing. A lot of not recyclable, some of it is, just packaging, plastic packaging. So maybe just being aware of the plastic we use is a way to get involved. And I actually printed off the Microplastics Pledge, which is here. It's really cool. I mean, even if you don't want to send it in, it just has things that you can do. You know, read labels on personal care products, use paper, reusable shopping bags. So just kind of guide, you know, things you can do. So you can get involved. Also, just staying current. If you like the Florida Microplastics Awareness page, they also are on Facebook. So becoming a member of their Facebook page, checking out what's going on. Yeah, taking the pledge, like I mentioned. So there's ways to get involved. I know I'm going to try to remember to bring my own containers to restaurants for to-go containers. I mean, that's my new goal, is to remember to do that. So this ties into, like I mentioned, we do a lot of different things at my work and my job. We're all over the place. So this is kind of neat because this ties into our Leave No Trace program. We have partnered with the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. It's the most widely used outdoor ethics program in the country. It's pretty old, started in the early 80s, and very current. They have a lot of educational programs, a lot of working with public lands around the country, how to promote sustainable use of our recreational lands. And that, like, as you remember, our mission is to help people enjoy the outdoors, but we have to protect the outdoors at the same time. We have millions of people making it to the state parks and the national parks a year, and there's a lot of impacts. These areas are becoming damaged. So how can we not do that? You know, how can we really take care of our land? So Leave No Trace is great. We use that in our management of our aquatic reserves. In our outreach education, we have installed dispensers on some spoil islands where people camp with wag bags. Does anyone know what a wag bag is? The islands are very small. They're made out of sand and limestone. They have a lot of campers. We do not want people using the bathrooms on the islands, meaning just in nature. So there are these that are being widely used throughout the country in national parks and areas where there's sensitive lands. Human waste is a serious problem. If you Google it, it pops up. Zion National Park, who's ever been there? Has anyone been to Zion? Beautiful, that's where I did my Leave No Trace class. They're having to close down areas that had major human waste issues, very sensitive land. So these are pack in, pack out. These are fully biodegradable, compostable, safe. They have an enzyme in them to break everything down. These have been used for a long time by backcountry people, hikers, campers, and also people who do like prescribed fires. You know, they're out there for a long time. You need to pack out everything, so these are really great. So I learned about these. It's kind of part of this whole Leave No Trace program. And the whole plastics thing is part of our Leave No Trace program. How do you, when you go out camping, you know, how can you not leave things behind? Because we find a lot of plastics on the islands. So, you know, enjoying a wonderful lagoon and leaving no trace. So it kind of weaves into that. We're also a hotspot for Leave No Trace, which means that we had special attention. Special places around the country were chosen, so we had Leave No Trace trainers come here. They gave a talk here 2 winters ago, the traveling trainers, did a lot of cool outreach and events and stuff, so that was really cool. And there's us cleaning up things on the spoil islands, bags of lots of cigarette butts and water bottle caps, a lot of those. And we learned that the Ocean Conservancy, because they were at one of the events that we were at, they had the top 5 things, pieces of trash that were found in the ocean, actually, and cigarette butts and the caps to plastic water bottles were top 5. Has anyone here heard of Leave No Trace before? So, just another picture here. We're on their website, so if you go to Leave No Trace website and search Indian River Lagoon, it's really cool. Because we are a hotspot, they help us design programs, all to do with things, litter. I just had pictures here of constructed toilets on the spoil islands, basically just a wooden thing that people sit on and creating problems. The plastic and the trash, vandalism, things like that. So, but here's some fishing line on a blue heron or on its beak. It's really sad, but we're constantly finding dead birds and often sea turtles with line wrapped around plastic, things like that. Pelicans, a lot of pelicans with fishing line and plastics, so not cool. But we were part of the hotspot report, so it was really cool to get help and on a lot of these projects. So that's it. I want to leave it open to questions and conversations. I know the last few talks, people really like to learn about the different options, in terms of single-use plastics. So we can talk about anything you want. And I brought brochures here from the Microplastics Awareness Project, general information. So feel free to take those. I also have Leave No Trace stuff that we've made from our office. And beautiful poster. So. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question about the fibers, because I think it's Patagonia that I know it's a better brand of outdoor clothing, but
Yeah.
I kind of took pride in the purchases that I made, because their fleece jackets, as you mentioned, are made with recycled plastic. So now when you wash those jackets, you're saying those fibers run out in the water, and that can become part of the small plastic problem.
Yeah, because those don't get caught in the filters of the water treatment. So, but I was curious about Patagonia, because I do like that they have great, they take a lot of responsibility in what they make and how they make it. But I am curious in terms of, it's great they're using recycled materials. But I do want, stuff still might be coming off. It's hard, it's a challenging thing.
Oh, I'm just wondering about filtering. Is there any filter that's small enough or enough to capture that stuff that you could use?
Yeah, I heard, I need to look it up. I heard that there are products being made that you can purchase that you can put on your own washer or dryer to collect the microplastics. So, yeah, I'll have to Google that to see if that's happening. Yeah, that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
And then that way you could wash a Patagonia jacket and see. And look at it under a microscope.
But then you'd have to put it in the trash, and then the trash.
I know, right?
That's what I'm thinking.
I know. It's a tough thing, and sometimes it's overwhelming because But reading about the plastics and why it's being made, consumers do drive the market in terms of what we demand. So I think there's a lot of demand for more natural products, and if that keeps up, then hopefully, we can do it. Like those bags, those WAG bags, the originals were not. People are asking me, well, that's great that you're taking the human waste off the spoil islands and it's safe enough to throw in the trash, but what about those bags? I know. But because of that, they've made a compostable one that breaks down. So it can be done, And I love that now, that I can buy those bags and say that. And I have the certificate from California saying that this is compostable and some certificate and proof that it is, So the market, there are things being made, which is great. But yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Your job would be difficult, I would think, to keep a positive attitude, because we're all buying shirts in Florida that wick the sweat, and those are not cotton shirts,
Yeah, and that's a good point. I remember when I went back to school for conservation biology is a very reactive field in terms of wildlife and environmental problems and how do we solve them. So you're coming into things that are already dire and tragic, and it can be really overwhelming. So yeah, days where I don't want to be mad or depressed, I tend to sometimes stay away from the spoil islands. I hate to say that, but the other day we went out, and it's just, I love our lagoon, and I love nature. And sometimes we go on the islands and they're just trashed. And I'm like, stay positive, okay, And we have volunteers out there with the Friends of the Spoil Islands. They're out there helping cut down invasive trees and fixing the picnic tables. And I really want to build this Leave No Trace program because it does work. It really does work. We are making new signs. I'm designing new signs that will have really great current relevant information that will go on the recreation islands. A lot of times, and the studies and the research show it, that a lot of things that happen in nature, these recreational impacts occur because of a lack of knowledge. There is that percentage of people who are doing this because they're not nice, and they're shooting the signs, or they're burning down my signs, which happened on the islands. But that's actually a small percentage. So a lot of people, who knew that you shouldn't be going to the bathroom in the spoil islands? I go out there and I talk to people, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I'm like, I didn't either, so don't worry, it's okay. But here's a bag. They're like, thank you, that's so cool. So a high percentage of these impacts are just because people just don't know. So if you provide that information and a way to do things, not just, well, this is bad, but hey, here's how you can help. it does make a difference. So I really want to build that Leave No Trace program, get more people involved. Our friends group, the Friends of the Spoil Islands, they want to have island ambassadors. And they're out there, they're retired, they're out there a lot on the boats talking to people. So if they had the Leave No Trace information in the bags and they could be talking to people, that works. It really does. So, it's building, but we're working on it,
So what is the impact of human waste on this planet?
So, several things, good question. Number one, human waste provides pathogens, bacteria, and dangerous things, when it's just left untreated. Like, we have treatment plants for things like that to break human waste down, right? So imagine, I know this is gross, but imagine you get on a spoil island and you want to camp and you've got kids, or maybe you get a dog or something, and it, number one, smells like human waste. But your dog could roll in it, the kids could come in contact, it's dangerous. So it's a human health issue. I brought the health department out to some of the islands and their mind was blown. They were like, this is an absolute human health problem. The constructed toilets just make mounds of human waste. The research has shown that even in really good soil, it takes up to 10 years for E. coli, other bacteria to go away. It remains. So let alone in the sandy limestone, substrate that we have. So it's dangerous. And then it also takes away from the experience, the nice natural experience of spending time.
Like maybe 1 year ago, I read a research in which one newborns had genetic problems, and they didn't know where those things come from. And the research ended up that the only conclusion they had is the consumption the mothers and the parents had with plastic. So bottles with plastic, everything made with plastic, and plastic is a chemical. So I wonder if they are looking forward to see something much worse than just trash.
Right. Yes, that is a huge focus of research right now, is the toxins associated with the plastics. So, and they're finding that not only are they made with toxins, but they do happen to absorb them. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And that's a whole big topic in terms of environmental stressors, things that we're in contact with, our personal care products, the things we put on our skin, things like that. There's a lot of toxins that are very bad for us, that it's completely illegal. Very little regulation in the beauty industry, or the industry in terms of body products. So yeah, we're bombarded, and think about all that plastic in the environment with all those toxins. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue with that because, I'm so thankful for people like you and all the people here who are aware and educated about how to make small changes in your own lives. But what are the bigger solutions? Because our impacts are only so big on an individual level.
Exactly.
Are there any movements to legislate any controls on microplastics?
That's a great point, great question. So the first thing that pops to mind is when Obama was president, he did make an executive order. I don't know how widespread it was, if it was just I think it was throughout the whole country, that microbeads could not be made anymore in personal care products. Like the production of those teeny little microbeads, I think is not occurring anymore. I'll have to look into that. But that's a wide scale, that's a federal thing, right? But in terms of being overwhelming, what can we actually do on a large scale? The first thing I think of is communities coming together to come up with projects. For example, I lived on a small island off of Puerto Rico for years before I came here, in Vieques. Has anyone heard of Vieques? It's a very special place. And lots of trash on the beaches. It's just overwhelming. They recently, which is so huge, have stopped using plastic bags on the entire island. And that was something that started real grassroots with a few people and students, and it built and built and built, and now there are no plastic bags being used. So that's great. So that's an example of the community coming together. Okay, how can we make this happen? And I was just invited, the IRL NEP who funded our project, they were approached by the EPA, who has a trash-free waters program throughout the country, and work with different places around the country to develop specific projects to that area what is your problem with litter? Can we make a project out of it? Can we try to attack it? So we've had these meetings recently. How do we make big changes locally here on the Treasure Coast with litter and trash and plastic making to our lagoon? So it's not easy, but yeah, sometimes it starts grassroots, and it can snowball, and it can turn into something big. So.
I can say something to that. I'm German, and we started all this when I was young, and I'm 54. I mean, I was in elementary school and we talked about the environment, which doesn't happen here much. And basically, because my generation was like, we don't want to be part of this anymore, people were starting to think about plastic bags, and how the change happened there was that the companies like Publix would start charging for the plastic bags, even if it was only 5 cents. People don't like to spend money. And so all of a sudden people brought their own reusable bags. So it's very seldom, when I travel to Europe, it's very seldom that you ever get a free plastic bag anywhere. You have to usually pay for it, or they give you paper or something as an alternative. So it comes from people like us and our impact of saying no. And anytime at Publix they offer me plastic bags, I say, no, there's already enough plastic in the oceans. And I say it very loudly so that the people around me hear it. And it's not judgmental or something, it's just to raise the awareness and talking to people. And in my company, I give away this Christmas the reusable bags, So when we think we don't have an impact, the only thing we can do is our hula hoop. And our hula hoop and talking to people and raising awareness, I think, and supporting organizations.
Emily, you said you're from New England, and there are cities and towns in New England that are now starting to ban plastic bags, but it tends to be the wealthier towns where people maybe have more education and.
Well, there's some areas where I think
minuscule.
Florida as a state, I believe it was Governor Rick Scott, made it impossible to ban plastic bags as a state. But yeah, it was like you cannot ban plastic bags.
Like local governments couldn't.
Well, I think that if the community from the ground up wanted to say, and the companies, say Publix said, well, we want to not have plastic bags, that can happen. So I think in terms of large scale stuff, I was thinking about this too, because when I was researching plastic production, I said, you know what? Yes, it does take grassroots, but it also takes from the top as well. So we have these large companies in China, Brazil, US, producing a lot of this plastic. They can make decisions too to not do certain things, right? I mean, we have people making really cool things and discovering cool things, and there's a market for green energy and reusable things and natural products. So I haven't lost all hope. I think things can be done from the bottom and the top. But the person who owns the grocery stores in Vieques where I live, they spoke to the community had a large part, but they made the decision. They didn't have to ban plastic bags in their grocery stores. They said, no, we'll do it, and we'll spend some money to buy some reusable bags for the first month or two, just get them out, and then from then on, people figure it out. People bring their own, and I go there every year, twice a year. People have their reusable bags, their cotton bags, or their cardboard boxes. So it just, behaviors can be formed, and changed. So it can be done. So in terms of this trash-free lagoon meeting I went to, there was a lot of different players that came to the meeting. And has anyone heard of like Keep America Beautiful, like Keep Fort Pierce Beautiful, or Keep Brevard County Beautiful? There's these, and I met the gentleman who was in charge of Keep Brevard County Beautiful, and he was talking about a program in Brevard County that is awesome. They work with restaurants, just starting first with the restaurants that are on the water, to be part of this litter quitter program that they've created. They have not only worked with the local companies, but they're working with large corporations that provide packaging to the restaurants. And they're providing money and funding to litter quitter restaurants that join in to provide low-cost, recyclable, natural, to-go containers, straws, things like that. So it's not just the community local, but it's also the big companies that are like, yeah. So if you have your plan and you have your project, this is what I'm going to do. So you can still make money because we're going to be buying, if you put it together, they'll buy in. And Coca-Cola and other large corporations are funding these projects at the community scale. So it's tough to kind of pinpoint a few projects, for things, but the funding is there, and then the big companies will pitch in. So that litter quitter program, they have a lot of restaurants that are in there, and you can be at different levels and work your way up, starting with straws only on demand, or no straws, or I guess there's a complete shortage of paper straws on the planet. Like, the people who make paper straws are just, there's no more right now, and they're backlogged. So, but the straw thing, the plastic bags, the styrofoam, we still make styrofoam. Oh my gosh. So there's different levels that the restaurant can be involved, but then they get recognition, they get the sticker on their door, they get, it's a kind of a cool thing, so that it's become cool, right? So you started a trend, you started a thing, it catches on. I really want to get it in Fort Pierce. I live in Fort Pierce. I think that would be really cool, especially if it was consistent, the litter quitter program for restaurants. And then other restaurants would catch on. Maybe eventually, like the bigger ones, like McDonald's and the chains. I mean, if they see, hey, they're all doing it and they're doing awesome, and the big companies are providing all the stuff, so who knows?
I mean, even Starbucks, it's a plastic inside the paper cup
Yeah,
that keeps it from leaking.
I know. And, I'm glad they said they're going to not use straws after, 2020, but the other day, I don't go there very often. I was like, oh, I'm going to get a treat. I'm going to have a latte. And they put the little plastic mixer thing in the I was like, no, wait, what? I was like, well, maybe it's biodegradable plastic. Maybe it's natural.
But even the paper cups are technically not recyclable because there's a plastic film.
Right, and that's another, so the activity in terms of how long things take to break down, I have one of these activities I do with kids, and I have plastic-coated paper. How long does that take? And it was up to 40 years. But, I mean, better than 600 years, but still. So I have the banana peel and the orange as, like, they take 2 to 3 years to break down. People just think, oh, I can just toss my food scraps. Well, not necessarily. It attracts animals. That's not what they eat. It can sit there for 2 to 3 years. But I have that, and I have a glass jar, which takes up to 1 million years. So it's fun to see the kids try to decide how long it takes for things to break down. Nylon rope. A lot of the plastics they found, the microplastics in the oysters they found, were, they suspect, from fraying line ropes. Think about it, with all the boats, a lot of derelict traps, a lot of things in the water, and the fraying ropes. You can think of a fraying rope right on the dock or something, and it just kind of little pieces of plastic. So they found a lot of blue fragments from, like, blue line, I think. So they have now a campaign to educate about changing out your lines, keeping new lines, and making sure they're not old and up to date, and they are up to date and not fraying.
Kind of what we were talking about with the to-go containers. I'm from Washington D.C. and it's illegal for food places to give styrofoam containers.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, and there's pockets around the country, in the world, obviously, where there's a different level in terms of what's happening. But I'm telling you, single-use plastic, it's got to go. But I'm really proud of Vieques for getting rid of plastic bags. I think that's great.
From time to time, you see people collecting the lids, the plastic lids, and then they say, no, we're not collecting them anymore. What are the programs out there where you can save, your lids?
I don't know, that's a good question. I'm not really sure, and one of the topics that came up in this meeting was bringing waste management into the conversation. I don't know, what are the different programs, and how does the public know about them in terms of things like that? So I'm not really sure, but I'm sure it's city to city, county to county. But to have programs in terms of, recycling.
They were making wheelchairs out of the recycled plastic.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Out of the lids.
That's great.
I don't remember who was doing it, whether it was Scout Troop or...
Yeah. Yeah, and then
Here, or was it a fluke? I read somewhere that the European Union is banning single-use plastics by 2024.
yeah, I'm not sure. I heard something about that too.
Because, that would be
That'd be
awesome,
huge.
It'd
be cool if they could cut down on palm oil demand.
Well, there's one question, and I know that's a big subject, is I never understood where really the garbage patches are coming from. Is it from the countries that are really not having a brain and they just dump everything in the oceans, or is it coming from our
It's coming from
recycling
all
stuff?
over. I think it's a very complex, a lot of it we do a lot of shipping of trash. A lot of the recycling that we do here gets shipped on ships to China. So stuff can fall off boats. A lot of it just makes its way to the waterway through canals, rivers, making it to the ocean, and then just floating. Currents, winds, hurricanes, things. I mean, a lot of that plastic's probably really old too. So, I mean, it gets into those currents and probably travels long distances. So not only, barges and ships and making it from land, but yeah, people are trying to wonder, okay, where are the hot spots? Where are they coming from? But we have a lot of huge cities on the water. We have a lot of coastal development all around the world. So it's probably coming from all different areas.
But there's really still countries who just don't.
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I sure hope not. But
Because, I mean, the EU, the UN, I mean, that's what they should be looking at.
Right.
They say, okay,
yeah,
you're polluting the whole world, so let's not support your government anymore if you don't take care of the trash program.
right. And I mean, just waste management on the globe. That's a huge thing. Just waste management.
Or they dump the
We produce a lot.
waste.
How do we deal with it? Yeah. I mean, it's a huge thing.
What did you find in the mussels that you collected from the lagoon in November?
Good question. So the oysters have not been processed yet. Casey, the master's student who's at UCF, she will be doing the hard work of processing the oysters and filtering them, but I'm dying to know. So yeah, as soon as they're out, actually, I'll give you everyone, I have cards. What we want to do throughout the study is, as we can look at our samples and look at the oysters and get that information, make it public, get it on Facebook, get it out so people can see what we're doing and see our results. So we don't know yet.
What do you do with them? You just keep them in tanks, or?
So what she did, so we went out into the field, she had a cooler, and we were like, okay, how can we're gonna collect the oysters, we do not wanna put them in a plastic container, because like a Ziploc bag has little plastic fibers that come off the top, so she ended up bringing foil, aluminum foil, and she put each oyster in the foil, and just try to minimize contamination the best we can. So she took the oysters, and individually wrapped them in tin foil. They're labeled from site. Put them in a cooler, and then she would bring them back to the lab. And eventually, it's a process where she opens the oyster and then takes the whole inside of the oyster and dissolves it with scientific grade hydrogen peroxide. So it's a dissolving process, and then you filter that out, and then look at that filter, the microplastics. So you're just dissolving the entire thing. And then, there's a lot of questions, well, where in the oyster and how is it impacting their reproduction? Like one study found that in the lab, live oysters' reproduction went down with their ingestion of microplastics. We're not necessarily getting that deep into it, but eat an oyster, eat the whole thing, right? So it's just there. So we're just, she'll just be dissolving them and then filtering them and looking at them that way.
Do you know anything about putting oyster mats on pilings in the lagoon to help purify the water? There's a doctor that came to our community here on the Barrier Island, Dr. Weaver from FIT, and I'm on the environmental committee of my community, and we're going to be working with him this coming year, 2019, to install these mats on the pilings of our docks.
Yeah, I do know a lot about so in terms of our office, we're not permitting. Permitting is in DEP and we work a lot with them. So projects that happen in our lagoon and aquatic reserve, we often help in terms of making it the best project it can be, helping with the permitting, and we like to work with folks that want to do these projects. So in terms of oyster restoration, that is a really complex and interesting endeavor and topic. Because they are a great ecosystem, right? We've got the mangroves, salt marsh grasses, oysters. So it is tough though. But I think the wrapping is a good idea in the sense that you're not putting stuff on the bottom of the lagoon. And keeping them elevated like that is an interesting, and I think that's cool. And if people want to have...
And the mats are plastic.
Yeah, so that's a tough thing.
They use zip strips
Yeah.
to affix the mats to the pilings, but he
Right.
said that they're trying to find
They are,
a
and we
better-
all are in this community of oyster restoration. We as an office are not doing any oyster restoration, and we will not put plastic in the lagoon. we don't like, so as of now, people are using all those plastic Maltex bags to put oyster shell in and then dump them in the lagoon. Those do break down. We keep an eye on projects that go out. I pull plastic bags that had oyster shell out of mangroves. Zip ties do break down. I find them in the lagoon. I go to these spots, take pictures, and we show people, show the permitting. This is not cool, and these are not being monitored. So we care about the lagoon. We want smart projects that work, right? And that don't hinder the lagoon. So we work with Fish and Wildlife, we work with permitting, that we really want to up the monitoring of these projects, especially the ones that are on the bottom and that have plastics. So if they're starting to they're not working, they're just collecting algae and no oysters and there's plastic, please go take that out, So we really need to be smarter about these things. And I do like the wrapping. There's not so much, like I said, it's not on the sediment.
Purposely, I mean,
Right.
because that
Yeah.
part of the research had been
Yeah.
done about putting things on the floor
Yeah,
of the
and there-
lagoon,
you know,
so having it elevated.
Yeah, and our main priority, we have
And it's to
seagrass is
filter
so
the
important,
water.
right? We don't want to cover up areas that may have had seagrass and it might come back. Just because it's bare now doesn't mean it won't have seagrass. There's a lot of things that live in the sediment. And then just putting oyster shell out doesn't mean the oysters will come. It's really hard to start and eat. So what they do is they have a lot of natural oyster reef up there, and what happens is the wakes, so they pick zones that have been damaged from boat wake. So you'll have roll-ups. You get the front of the reef that rolls up and dies and covers that kind of next part on the reef. So what they do is they'll rake those shells back down and then kind of put the mats in that zone to create, they get that settlement of the larva and they rebuild that zone. So they're not necessarily throwing, mats on areas where there weren't oysters. They were kind of fixing damaged areas of those natural reefs up there. But yeah, Linda Walters, who's kind of the queen of those oyster mats, and yeah, she too is like, she's the one that's heading up this project that we're doing, collaborating with her. And so it's a real effort. Like, yeah, we've used plastics and we'd love to use something else. I don't think right now she's putting out any new mats. There's a lot of monitoring of the different areas that they've kind of fixed. And they have worked in those areas. Mats are very specific to a specific type of restoration goal. Where we don't have vast amounts of oyster reef here in Brevard County, New River County, St. Lucie County, like they do up in Volusia County. So those mats are specific for those filling gaps in an existing oyster reef. We have very small, fringe, patchy reefs down here. So mats aren't really great to create an ecosystem. So she hasn't been doing that. She just stays in those zones. But yeah, we need to find some other natural product. But I think we can do it. We make so many cool things. How can we not come up with? It's tough though. The water here is different than it is in the west coast of Florida. Up north, in the temperatures in the water in New Smyrna or near St. Augustine are colder, so they have better luck. Their products don't break down as quickly. But our stuff, within 6 months, boom, it's gone. So the oyster shells are just everywhere, so that's not going to work. So it's a tough thing, but it's kind of the charge right now in the management community. What can we find? And we're very supportive of finding something else to use.
I had heard that they used to make armor out of the mussel beards. And if we could just figure out how to make bags out of the mussel beards.
Yeah, so
because it's such a
the
strong.
way the mussels attach, that is very, very strong.
Yeah.
Mimicking nature's.
Yeah, its own
Yep.
properties and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was pretty hopeful about these potato starch products.
Yeah.
They didn't look, it was crazy. It looked like plastic. It was like a cream color.
Yeah.
A little greasy when you touch it. It really looked like plastic, but completely natural. And no toxin, or just potato.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something that we can find.
There just has to be the demand
Yeah, exactly.
for people to put the money into it.
But, a lot of these groups we work with, the ELC, the Brevard Zoo, the Oxbow, they have huge groups they're very involved with the community. And they put out, social media, they have events, they have hundreds of volunteers. And that's why I think collaboration is so important. So we stay collaborative with the ELC and the Oxbow and universities. Then what we learn through what we do every day in our research, we communicate that to the restoration community, the groups, we get out to the public. So that's why working together is so important. So that if we do discover, oh my gosh, this product works, it's really great, share it, get it out to the community. So In terms of fun things they brought, if anyone camps or goes out to the spoil islands or spends time kayaking in the lagoon, I did bring a bunch of wag bags. Feel free to take 1, 2, or 3 of them. I also have leave no trace booklets that are specific to the lagoon, whether it's like I said, kayaking, paddleboarding, just a day visit, or camping, and brochures, some rack cards, and then the ELC information is on the other side of that. So, and then there's some leave no trace stickers. Feel free to take 1 or 2. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Oh wow.
Good.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Very good.